Robert and Edward have been neighbors for the past 30 years. They attended the same college, worked in the same industry, married in the same year, and they now live in the same town. They like the same baseball team, the same brand of cars, Mercedes, and the same fishing spot. There's just a single point on which they disagree. Robert believes in saving and investing small amounts consistently over time, while Edward believes that using his money now, rather than later, is better. Because after all, it takes so long to make any real money with investing, Edward would tell himself. Both Robert and Edward have a very different outlook on life, which has led to, over the years, some interesting differences in their lifestyles. Back in the day, as soon as Robert received his first paycheck, he decided he would learn about how to invest and save, even with just the $100 he had in his checking account. "Better to start now and get it out of the way while time is still on my side," Robert said. Robert also understood that Social Security and most pension plans probably won't be enough to live a secure retirement. The first thing he did was to start calculating how much he needed to save and invest to ensure that he had a decent income in hand after retirement. Or maybe Robert hoped to retire early. After much research and conversations, Robert understood that he needed to save at least 80% of his current income if he wanted to replace his paycheck entirely with passive income. This is known as a wage replacement ratio. Though Robert told himself if he only saved 30% some months, it was better than nothing, and that investing is a marathon, not a sprint. He also learned about the Rule of 72 on an early retirement blog, which he used to figure out how long it would take his investments to double in value. After this, Robert began to invest, starting here and there with sometimes as little as $100 a month. Robert was so excited to tell his college friend, Edward, about investing. He was surprised when Edward argued that the stock market is way too risky, and he'd rather spend and enjoy his money now, rather than later. "What's the point of learning all of that about investing just to be rich when I'm 60? Edward would say with his arms folded. "When I'm young, I'm gonna enjoy it." You do have a point. But think of the future. If you invest just a little bit now and find cheaper ways to have fun today, you can be so much more rich when we're older. Robert would try to convince his friend. He also explained how returns from the stock market over time can go up in value 3 to 5 times. For example, let's say you save $10 each month for 30 years. You are going to save $120 annually and end up with $36,000 after 30 years. Now let's say you start with that same $10 and invest $10 every month in the stock market for 30 years, for a return of roughly 10% every year, which is the average rate of return for S&P 500. You will end up with more than $19,000, which is 5 times more than leaving all of your money in a savings account, or worse, spending it. This method is known as dollar cost averaging, where the impact of fluctuation in stocks is decreased by investing a small amount over time. Now imagine if you saved most of your paycheck this way. The money would add up very fast. Edward once again ignored Robert's words. In his prime, Edward always thought that he would invest when his paycheck went up enough. He thought starting with just $100 was too little to even make a difference. And at that time, $100 could make or break a trip with his friends. What he didn't realize was that he was losing precious time waiting for his income to rise. Continuing with the previous example, if Edward invested $10 every month with a 10% annual rate of return, he would have lost out on more than $15,000 in growth of his investments. With larger numbers than $10, the amount he's losing out by not investing gets even larger. However, at this time, Edward still chose not to invest. Going back to Edward and Robert's conversation, shortly after Edward dismissed Robert's advice to invest in the stock market, Edward came up with a clever alternative: a savings account. He argued that savings accounts are safer, more convenient, and provided him with a return too. "I'm already saving. It's called a savings account. So you're wrong that my money is not getting a return," he declared. Robert conceded that Edward had a point about savings accounts, but he said that a savings account has too small a rate of return. For example, the most recent average return on a standard savings account is only 0.06%, which means if you invest $10,000, you only earn $6 annually. That is something, but compared to investing, you just aren't taking advantage of the power of compounding returns. If you stay in just a savings account, that isn't enough, and your money won't grow fast enough to keep up with stocks or inflation. However, Edward was still not convinced. At least money remains safe and sound in the savings account, and I don't need to spend my time learning about charts and graphs all day. Robert tried to explain the effects of inflation and how it eats away at your savings over time, because the rising price of goods is not matched by the minimal interest given to a savings account. Inflation seriously impacts the purchasing power of a consumer. Let's say you had $1,000 saved up, and inflation was 10%. If you want to buy yourself a new laptop that costs $1,000 and inflation jumps 10%, your purchasing power will be compromised by 10%, and you will need more money to buy that same laptop. You must find investments that rise with inflation. Savings accounts can't do that. Robert does think that savings accounts are a good place to keep the money you need in the short term, say 6 months to a year. But in the long term, savings accounts simply don't cut it in a competitive world of high-return investments. One fear that Edward had not shared with Robert is that he finds learning about investing overwhelming. Edward does not want to spend all that time learning about how to invest. There are so many terms like options, ETFs, depreciation, it feels like college all over again to Edward. A potential solution for this problem would have been to hire a professional who can save Edward's time and help create a diversified portfolio of varied but high-return investments for Edward. But now, Edward and Robert are both in retirement. Let's see what happened. After the recession in 2020 and higher inflation, Edward's savings account funds lost some purchasing power. Edward is able to stay retired and avoid picking up a part-time job, but he has to be very careful with his expenses. Not only this, if Edward does not start investing now, Edward will potentially lose out in the rebound as economic activity picks up again after the recession in 2020. Robert, on the other hand, will participate in the economic recovery as he invested in stocks, real estate, and other income-generating assets that rise during a recovery. Robert feels relaxed anytime he checks in on his savings and portfolio. Edward, however, is bound to lose out, as he does not yet have the knowledge even at this stage to take advantage of opportunities in investing. Thankfully, Edward is trying to move his savings from his bank account to stocks and other sources of passive income. But he can't help but notice Robert seems to go on fishing trips a lot more often than Edward, and he can't figure out how Robert could afford to buy a brand new car for his daughter to take to college. Edward thought, he even retired 10 years earlier than I did. I worked longer than him. How can he afford all of this? This is because across the street from Edward, Robert owns a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, and closed-end funds that has gone up in value over the years. The dividends from this portfolio provides him with a steady stream of passive income that covers his expenses. He recently bought a sleek new Mercedes, which was his dream during college, made some additions to his house, and he goes out every weekend to fish at his favorite spot. You can see that just because of one simple difference in mindset when it came to saving and investing, Edward and Robert's lives turned out very differently. While Edward had his reasons to not invest or save, his current financial struggle could have been avoided entirely had he just started small in his 20s, investing $100 here and there. Edward did not invest in the stock market and has started to think about it in his later years, but he is far behind Robert, who started early and invested consistently. Would you rather be like Robert and build a lasting net worth, or be like Edward and avoid the headache of learning how to invest? The choice is yours. If you want to get started investing the right way, consider using an investment app like M1 Finance or Webull. These investing apps allow you to buy and sell shares and funds directly from your smartphone. Down in the description, we have affiliate links to M1 Finance for beginner investors and Webull for advanced investors. Both are affiliate links that help out the channel when you sign up using them. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and good luck investing!